Today on the show, I am joined by the gorgeous Nicky Duffell. She's a registered nutritionist and maturation coach, executive coach, functional medicine, Reiki healer, and if that's not enough, a specialist interest in grief. So hello there, Nicky.
Hey Shelley, thank you for having me today.
Bless you. Did I say that coach word right? Maturation.
Yeah, maturation coach. Yeah, it's quite different. There's not many of us in the UK. It looks at ontological inquiry, which again is another big word, but it looks at how we are as human beings, the kind of the process of being human and where that takes us. And yeah, it's really quite fascinating.
Oh, bless you. Now, speaking of fascinating, you don't just have like one amazing story, you have about four, maybe even five, and you're the most smiley guest I've had in a long time. So
Oh,
take us back and share how it all started, this
yeah.
amazing story.
Oh, bless you. I mean, I was thinking about how to kind of get this across today because so much happened in such a short period of time, and I've got a bit of distance from it now. It's 14 years ago, but it started really in 2005, and I was just about to get married. I was kind of in that pre-marriage, I don't know, excitement, and we'd been living with my mother-in-law to be with cancer. She had ovarian cancer, and a couple of weeks before we were due to get married, we were told that it was terminal. And so we were dealing with that as we got married, and not long after she died. So yeah, and it's hard to put into words, losing somebody that trying to support my husband through that. But then just 6 months after she died, my mum was diagnosed with cancer. And so it just all really, it's really quite difficult to find the words. It all just kind of blew up, I suppose, all came up. And not long after that, we found out that it was terminal in the February 2007, I think. And yeah, 6 weeks later, my mum died. So that was just, I mean, it just blew my world apart, losing my mum, at a young age. And then just a year later, my marriage broke down as well. My husband left and my marriage broke down. So really during that time, everything that I knew, my two really key relationships, my mother and my husband, just fell away. And yeah, I definitely went into the real depth, the real darkness of grief through that time. Yeah, I was heartbroken.
Yeah, and it's, as you were saying, like when you wrote it on your application form, I was just like, wow, because there's like five stories in one, and all within like
Yeah,
2 years, and it was just loss,
yeah,
loss, loss. And you had the loss with the diagnosis, then the death, then the diagnosis, then the death, then the husband leaving. And it's just like you're not really dealt with one, and then you get the other. So there's like all these secondary
yeah,
losses coming through. Bless you.
yeah, yeah. It's really hard to think back now, because I think, and I know you know this, but I think grief changes so much, and I believe it lives within me, and it feels very different now to how it did back then. But I remember I remember for the first time, how people talk about being heartbroken. I remember feeling it physically for the very first time, that depth of heartbreak. I thought my heart was going to break in two. It felt so deep, so painful, that I literally thought I was going to break. I didn't know how I was going to survive. Yeah.
And that's so understandable. I think even like when you lose a key relationship like the one with your mother, but then you was
Mm.
living with, yes, your mother-in-law with you, and then your husband, as you say, these are all like key relationships. So you
Yeah.
reached this point where there was just you left, Nicky, was it?
Yeah, my very foundations. I mean, I was lucky because I still had my sister. I had the support of my sister and my friends and my dad. So I did have people around me. But I think grief can be quite lonely. You know, my sister and I often talk, and our experiences, we both lost our mother, but our experiences are completely different of that time. You know, I think it's just so, grief is so unique to you that it's just a very personal process, but in that it can make it very lonely.
Yeah, and it is so important what you just shared about unique's really, you know, the unique grief that we have. And I do say that all
Mm,
as unique as our fingerprint, because how we
mm.
grieve, whilst your sisters, you know, you would still have had your own life experiences, your own coping mechanisms and things like that. So whilst you're brought up in the same environment, it's really interesting and important that people learn that just because, you know, if they're going through grief, you might not be grieving the same as your family, your partner, because we are all different, and it's finding your own way through that grief.
It really is. It really is. We are so different. We have all of our different coping mechanisms, and yeah, it is. It's very different. Very, very different.
So share with us, if it's okay, the tips and tools you use. How did you cope with these multiple
Yeah.
losses?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say I was in survival. I kind of want people to know that it's okay not to be okay through the grief, you know, that for me it took time. It took a lot of time. You know, when I'm working with people now with grief, you know, even I was messaging somebody on Instagram the other day, and it's a year since they lost somebody significant. And I said, it's still early. A year is still early in that process of grief. So the first thing I would say is it doesn't need to look a certain way. Grief is messy. It, you know, it doesn't, you don't need to be all put together. And it really, really does take time. So I kind of, permission to grieve, I think, is really important, first of all. And then for me it was about finding the right help and support. So I tried a few things. I think we can be so desperate to feel better and to feel okay that you kind of want to try everything, or I did anyway. I just wanted to try everything. And that's what I mean about kind of being okay with not being okay. That's really hard, I think, in this society, because we all want to be better, or, you know. Um, but what I did is I just happened to find somebody. In fact, I started working with this wonderful teacher of mine, Shelley Bloom. Um, gosh, before my mother-in-law, I think just as my mother-in-law had become ill, I started working with her then, and I could just continued working with her. And she was my reiki lady, as I like to call her. And I used to go and see her, and I tried a grief counselor and that didn't work for me. So I think it's important to find somebody that you feel drawn to, that you connect with, that can support you, that you don't have to do it on your own. I think we can so often think that we need to do it on our own, and we don't. So to find those support mechanisms. And I think, Shelley, I don't know about you, but we grief still isn't talked about. Death and grief still isn't talked about very much. And you've got your wonderful book that's come out in the world. But even since this, so my mum died 14 and a half years ago now. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, there was nothing on Instagram. I love that you can go on to social media now and you can find support groups, that you can find people talking about grief. And I didn't have that when, you know, when my mum died. So I think it's great that we're starting to have that conversation more, and there's more places that you can go.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I've really opened that my childhood, we spoke really openly about death, dying and things like that. And then I did a career in nursing. So it's always been kind of natural for me. So it probably made sense. I went and wrote a book about it and launched a death cafe here in Northampton.
Yeah.
But it is because I don't have that awkwardness around it. I'm all right sort of starting those conversations around it. I really hope like people like yourself, myself, when we've gone through so much grief, that we can help others. And it is, as you said, permission to grieve. And that doesn't matter if your grief is short-lived, that, you know, if it comes, that death comes as a sense of relief because you've been a carer for years, or it was a bad relationship, or if you're in it for the long haul because you don't feel okay. It's that permission and self-care, whatever grief feels like for you.
Yeah, and I love that. And that just shows it's so different for all of us, isn't it? You know, we never spoke about grief. And one of the things, I think if I had one regret, was that we didn't talk to me, my sister and my mum didn't sit down and talk about her. We knew she was going to die, but we were in such deep denial that we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about how scared we were, you know? And I think it's wonderful that you did talk about it. I mean, I talk to my children about it now because I've got that experience, and they know about Nana, even though they've never met her before. And the death cafes, you know, I think they're amazing, that, you know, that they're out in the world as well. Yeah, and I didn't know about any of those things when I was going through it.
Yeah, no, I didn't have it. Like when my beautiful stepdad died, again, around the sort of same time you was having loss, around 2005, he died, and you didn't have it. And I'm not just being an advocate because it's in my book, but I'm the same as you, that grief counselling didn't work for me. I'm not a talking therapies kind of girl. And people probably think I am, Nicky, because I don't generally stop talking very much, if I'm honest. But the reason it didn't work for me is because there wasn't that sacredness to it. Like I was at university here in Northampton. My parents were down south in Essex. And so I was just telling someone, like, you know, all my kind of secrets, my love, my life lessons, to someone who didn't know my stepdad. And it just felt really cold to me.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, a bit like yourself, like, oh, it needs to work because everyone goes to talking therapies. And it's just like, if it's not for you, it's not for you. It's a very female thing. Like we tend to have instrumental grief in men and intuitive grief in women, and women are good at talking. But if that talking is like with you, with Shelley Bloom, the Reiki, or to me, my friends crying and snotting, if that's your way of talking therapy, then find your own way, isn't it? I mean, I don't want anyone to sort of, you know, whether it's from dictation of others or, you know, reading a book on grief and saying, you know, you have to have medication, you have to have talking therapies. Don't stop at that first try. Just keep going and keep doing that permission to grieve.
I think that's really important. Like you say, don't stop at your first try. You know, I think, you know, if I look back at that time, you know, there were times when, I mean, I didn't have anything really around me. I didn't have children, you know, at that point. And, you know, there were times that I didn't want to get out of bed. You know, I just didn't. I didn't want to face the world. It felt so dark and so bleak. And but there was always something that kept me going. There was always something that kept me going, and having that support. And I don't know why, that even in that time I knew that the counselling wasn't working for me. So even just having the courage to go, actually, you know, no, I don't want to continue, because that can take courage in itself, particularly when you're feeling that broken, to kind of to step away from the thing that in your mind is telling you this should be working, or you know, that sometimes it just doesn't. And it doesn't, you don't need to make it mean anything about yourself. You just need to find that right thing, no matter what it was. Journaling was also really helpful for me during that period. I've actually still got all my journals from that time, and so it's interesting reading back over them. But journaling was a really big support during that time as well, just to get all of the noise in the mind, because I did feel like I was going crazy. I'll be honest, I did feel like I was going crazy during the depths of my grief. And so getting all my thoughts out of me and onto paper really helped.
Journaling comes up so often on the show, what everyone's been
Yeah.
through, whether it's addiction, loss of confidence, relationship breakdowns, career changes, and it's the same tool that comes up again and again and again.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I was listening to some of your podcasts, I could hear that. And I stepped away from it recently, and I've been journaling less. I kind of write notes, but I've been journaling less, and that's what I find in my life. It kind of comes and goes, but it is always, writing for me is always there in some form or another. Even if I'm writing a post on Instagram or a blog for my website or my newsletter, or journaling, it's writing is very therapeutic for me. Writing is kind of something that really supports me, and I suppose that's it, isn't it? It doesn't need to look a certain way. Some people pour their grief into art. Some people scribble on the page if they need to get the anger out, or that kind of despair out. It doesn't need to look a certain way. There's so many things that can be supportive, I think.
Yeah, no, I do. I think it is like the creative outlet I'm really passionate about. And it's one of the tools of sharing good grief, whether it's like flicking paint on a canvas,
Yes.
doodling, even a child's colouring book, all those creative things. But it is, I think, also the physical outlets, sort of like rearranging furniture, doing a bit of sort of like DIY, or doing yoga, going for a walk in Mother
Yes.
Nature. And it is a
Yeah.
movement sort of internally, but externally as well.
Yeah. Yoga was the other thing that got me through. I did yoga and Reiki with Shelley, and yoga was the other thing that really supported me. Just kind of getting out of my mind and into my body. That's a constant kind of journey for me. These thoughts that aren't really ours, aren't really who we are, but that can take over. It's kind of constantly coming out of the mind and into the body. Anything that helps me do that. I just mentioned to you, I've just been open water swimming. When I do that, everything just goes. So yeah.
I love that, because we do get stuck in our thoughts, especially if we've got something coming up and we start to get anxious. We can, even as a positive changes expert, you still the worst case scenario. And I love how you just like flip it, because the mind and body is connected by more than just the neck, isn't it?
Yes, I think it really is. And the thing about our thoughts is that our mind is our survival mechanism. It's always looking for danger. That's how we're built. And it does a really good job of that. But sometimes it doesn't help us. It doesn't support us. I'm not making it wrong, but just to become aware of those thoughts, particularly I think if you're going through grief or anything, if you're going through something, it's like it ramps up. But I think it's so ironic. I often, when I'm tired or I'm feeling depleted, if I've had kind of, if I've been busy, I always think it's ironic that when I need my mind to be the quietest, it's the loudest. It's ironic how it works that way, but of course it does, because it's survival. It's looking out for you. But I think the more we can become aware, and I'm really passionate about the body as well, and if we can just get quiet, somehow get quiet, then I feel like the answers can come through. Well, there might not be an answer. Can we be okay with not knowing? But if we get quiet, I think we come back to ourselves. Yeah.
I love that. When I've been doing interviews recently, like not as a host, as a guest, people were saying, like, all the tools in Good Grief, your latest book, but what's the one tool that you say people could do today? And it is that 10 minutes a day out of 24 hours. I don't care how busy you are, how bereft
Yeah.
you are, 10 minutes sitting in silence. I bet they think, really, you've written a whole book and that's, your one thing. But it is getting okay in that silence, because that is where the answers are. That is where your inner world are. And it's scary. And if you're new to doing this 10 minutes of silence every day, it will feel like 2 hours, I tell you.
It really does. It really does. My relationship with like meditation and getting quiet has been just that. It's been a relationship. It's been a journey. But now it's so integral that if I don't do it, if I don't get that 10 minutes, like you say, I feel disconnected from myself. I feel really disconnected from myself. And I think that's it. It's just coming back to, we look so much outside of ourselves, but we do have it all within us. And that's not to say you don't need help or anything like that, or support. I think that's fundamental. But I think that connection to yourself, just coming back to the stillness, is just so important.
Yeah, it kind of keeps
So
me
important.
sane, I think. I wouldn't not want it in my daily practice. So it's very important that I have a daily routine. And that's not just when I've gone through grief, it's just day to day. And I do get up before the rest of the household. The dog tries to race me to that point, but I do try and get up. And I don't want to get up, when it's dark and 6:30 in the morning, but I have to get up and do yoga on my own. I like to do like a tarot card, and I do like to sit, what do I need to know about the day ahead? And I just love it. That 10 minutes, because if I'm just, even I've got like, look down at my schedule and it's sort of like, doing content here, this, there, it's practical, but I haven't got, I don't know, kind of like, I'm not aligned with what I'm doing. And so I have to sort of tap into myself, how am I feeling about the day ahead? What do I need to know? What do I need to change? And so 10 minutes to me is just a daily routine, no matter what I'm going through.
And I'm going to be honest, I don't manage it all the time, but I notice the days when I do get up and I manage to get up before my my children, which is always a win if I do. I just feel so much better. I feel like I feel like I'm ahead of myself in a way, I do. I always feel much better when I can do that, and when I make the decision to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I did get up early this morning, and I was tiptoeing like a ninja, but we have a dog. And when I was trying to do my yoga, she just kept patting me with her paw. But then it brought me laughter. But I think,
that's it.
yeah, and it is just finding the joy. So I love doing yoga. And if the dog's slapping me, that's still a good thing. But it's just when I get other people's words coming in, like the conversation with the children, I'm thinking, hang on, I'm not there yet. Some people can't get into the working day, can they, until they've had coffee, but mine's just like silence. And it is, I mean, the thing is, like, when we look at these tools for grief, the talking therapist comes at a cost, medication comes at a cost, and things like that. There's so many tools that are free, like walking out in Mother Nature, sitting in silence in your house, sort of doing yoga off of YouTube, it's all free. It's great, we can start even if we've got nothing.
I think that's a really good point. The thing that this journey over the last, like I say, probably now, 15, 16 years, my connection with nature has really changed through that time. I think I can be completely honest. It wasn't, I don't know, I was going to say it wasn't there when my mum died, but a memory's just popped into my head. And I remember taking myself off to the field near where I used to live, and just sitting by a tree and just sobbing, so I think maybe it was there, but I wasn't as conscious of it. But my relationship with nature has definitely changed and become more connected, noticing the seasons and how I feel, in autumn compared to summer, and really taking the time to transition, even now, just transition from late summer to autumn as we're in, and how that makes you feel and how that makes your body feel without making it mean anything. We always want to make it mean right or wrong. If we're feeling sad, we like to make it wrong, and it isn't. That's the human experience, to feel all of these things.
Yeah. That's when you know you're alive, isn't it? I think it's when you're feeling nothing
Yes.
and you're stuck in that numbness and the raw state.
Yeah.
That's the negative. That's where you really need to get help. I think, if you're just sort of going along and feeling really like sad or hyper, then you're alive.
Yeah, that's it. And I think what's just come to me, Shelley, is the impact of the pandemic and everything that we've experienced. I mean, we were talking about everything you've experienced through this pandemic, and we can't underestimate the grief and the loss in that, and how we've been feeling. I noticed that I love all of the seasons, but I notice even just going into the darker nights, I feel a little more heavier than I would usually do, because we've been through this pandemic, because we haven't been out very much, because we haven't been seeing people. I feel a bit heavier right now with the darker nights and coming into autumn. And so I'm just getting curious around, okay, that's okay. How is it going to feel without the fear taking hold? But how is it going to feel going into winter, still not having had, I don't want to use the word normal, but still not having had a lot of time out being with people. And now we're going into winter, which is a bit about hibernation and going inwards. And we've had a lot of inwards, over the last 18 months.
And I love what you're saying. Like, I think one of the opening lines in my latest book, Good Grief, the age-said approach of modern day grief healing, is that grief isn't exclusive to death of a loved one. Grief, by definition, is the loss of anything with which we have an emotional connection. And when I wrote it during lockdown, I had no idea how poignant it would be about the whole world grieving. It was just, well, I don't believe in coincidence. It was beautiful synchronicity, because actually in Good Grief, because I think I sent the link to a friend and she goes, oh, it's lovely, but I've not lost anyone. And I was like, well, actually, we all have, because it's whether you've lost a job, a relationship, finances, control, freedom, health, normality, sense of safety, plans when we couldn't travel. You're probably grieving and you're just thinking, oh, I just feel a bit run down, oh, a bit of chest ache, or my skin's got a bit of a flare up. I think so many of us are grieving, and it's not just about the death of our loved ones. So like you shared beautifully earlier, like your mum died, but then your relationship died as well. This is all grief, but I don't think the world recognizes it. The word I think they're looking for is bereavement, which is, the emotional experience of death of a loved one. But grief is that emotional loss to something, like your own self, your own story. It was like, your mother-in-law, your mum, your husband at the time. These were all things that you lost, but very different ways.
And that's it. And I lost myself as well. I had no idea who I was during that time. I really lost myself, and that can be, I think, really destabilizing. I had no idea who I was, where I was going.
That's maybe proper teary, because I get that, because like you're like the wife of someone or the daughter of someone, but then the whole physical, emotional, social, behavioral layers that we get with grief, you can lose sight of who you are.
And I didn't know how to be. At that moment, I didn't even know how to be a friend or even a sister to my sister, because I was so in my own pain. And so all of those identities, it all fell away. And I no longer believe in the phrase everything happens for a reason. I no longer believe in that phrase. I think because I think we want to find meaning and reason to make us feel better. That's not to say I don't believe in things coming out of it, because I wouldn't be here sitting here who I am today. My business wouldn't be the work I do that I love so very much, you know, now that I work with people in grief, in going through difficult life transitions, divorce, you know, that has given me this world that I love, you know. And I have a husband now, I have 2 children, beautiful children, and that's where my path and my journey has taken me.
See, I must admit, I do love the expression things
Oh,
happen
do
for a
you?
reason. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I do believe in synchronicity. I do.
Yes.
Like, I don't think it's
Yeah.
coincidence. Like, what's a coincidence? I thought that person, there they are. I think synchronicity, like
Yeah.
how my
Yeah.
second book came about, it's spooking the synchronicities that led to it. And it would just
Yeah.
flowed. But yeah, I do still like the expression things happen for a
You
reason.
do.
Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
kind of retrospectively, like when I look back, I was like, oh,
Mm.
yeah, that's why it
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. And I think my relationship has changed with the expression. I think, you know, I think that's what it is, you know. I think I desperately wanted to find a reason, because how could something so awful happen? How could something so awful happen? And now it's more that I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't be doing the work that I am today without it. But it still doesn't take away that something awful did happen.
Yeah.
You know, that was something, yeah, awful and heartbreaking. That did happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it took me back to Viktor Frankl, who I often quote. It was actually part of our nursing degree when we did palliative medicine. And Viktor Frankl says something along the lines of, we don't suffer from suffering alone. We only suffer when we don't, have a meaning. Why are we going through
Yeah.
this kind of thing? And I know we all
Yeah.
know that the 5 stages of grief by Kubler-Ross, but
Yes.
David Kessler added a 6th, and
He
put
did.
in meaning. And so
Yes.
I think, for me, as we said earlier, though, absolutely, like, trust yourself and find your own way. But for me, I draw comfort finding a reason of why things happen. Like my health the last year, talking of grief and the loss of health. For me, I kept saying, like, why is this happening for me? What's the lesson in this?
Yeah.
I didn't get the answer straight away. And when it came, I was like, oh, okay. But that's what works for me, finding that reason, finding that meaning. But absolutely find your own way.
That's it. And I love what David Kessler says around that kind of 6th piece around the meaning, because he talks about the time. It doesn't necessarily happen at the time. It can take time before you find that meaning, and it, what I've been through has definitely given meaning in my life in a completely different way. I never thought I'd be sitting here, A, talking about grief, and B, working with people with grief, and I think it's something, you used these words earlier, I can't remember when we were talking, but about the sacredness of it. And I feel like grief is something that's so sacred, and if I'm lucky enough for people to invite me in to help support them when they're going through something like that, it really is just such an honor.
Yeah, no, I was speaking about why talking therapies didn't work for me, because I had so many sacred stories that when I was given this on-site grief counsellor when I was a student nurse, a newly qualified nurse as well, when they'd put me in contact with him, it just didn't resonate with me. I do work quite a lot with a little bit of humor, works well with me. Do you know what I mean? And this was, and there's this sort of stoic, serious person just sitting there like telling me, and I was just like, my dad was like, my beautiful stepdad Badger was just the most humorous and gentle man. And it was just too, not clinical, but just too serious for me. But then it might work for
Yeah.
someone else. But for me, I was just sort of like, you're not my kind of person. And I think that's the thing,
Yeah.
like, you know, maybe
Yeah.
this has probably helped someone out there today. Like, so talking therapies wasn't for me because I didn't want to share stories to a stranger. But maybe they weren't my person. Maybe I should have gone and asked for someone else, like someone younger, or maybe a male, you know. So maybe if we, you know,
Yeah.
talking therapies doesn't work for you, rather than try another therapy, maybe try another therapist. But as we're
Yeah.
saying, isn't it, just keep trying. And I know it's hard. I mean, getting out of bed can feel like the most courageous act, can't it, when we're in grief?
Yeah.
But just keep going till you find the answers, I think.
Yeah. Just keep going until you find that person. You know, I owe a lot to Shelley. She was fundamental in my healing journey through grief. And yeah, like I said earlier, it doesn't need to look a certain way. It can be, just trust yourself. I think you know, you talk beautifully about synchronicity. You know, it's funny how sometimes people just pop into your world that you just, oh, they've popped into my world for a reason. And it might be through listening to a podcast. Another teacher of mine came in through, I listened to a podcast, and she was on there, and then I've been working with her for a number of years, and we have so many ways of things coming into our lives now. And so, you know, just trusting that, and I think yeah, I think these people pop into our lives. They can do.
Yeah, I think that's why I get so feisty and passionate, like in podcast writing, social media, any way I can. It's just because my thing is like, just try something new every day, you know, whether it's just like having a
Yeah.
different breakfast, moving around part of the home, going out for a walk. Because if you're just sitting at home in your grief, and I know it's comforting, and I know sometimes that's the best you can do, but I don't believe those synchronicities come in because you're just not shifting that energy or that daily routine or that mindset, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, just a little shift, like, you know, just pop into the shop or something can have
Yeah,
the biggest
something.
impact.
Yeah. And it's, I love what you said, even just trying a new breakfast, because, you know, particularly when we're going through something so difficult, you know, like I said, those survival mechanisms just kick in, and you know, you do. I mean, for me, I just wanted to curl up in a ball, and you know, I couldn't respond to messages, all of those sorts of things. But then, like you say, even just trying something new to eat can just fire up something different in the body that just changes things, you know. And just taking really good care of yourself and being really compassionate. You know, we can be so hard on ourselves. So bringing in that real compassion that you're going through a hard time, or even if you're not, even if you're listening to this and you're just having a day where, you know, you're not feeling on top of the world, that's okay. Just real compassion for wherever you are. I talk about compassion. My journey again with compassion is ongoing. You know, there's days that I'm really hard on myself, but the days when I can just be really compassionate towards myself are really helpful.
I love this. We've named so many different tools, from sort of like Reiki and journaling and writing, compassion and
Yeah,
self-care. So many. But
yeah.
if there's one positive change you could recommend for people to start with today, because we're saying like try one new thing a day, what one would you choose?
I'm pondering, because there are those few that we talked about in my mind. So I'm going to go with journaling, and I tell you why I'm going to go for journaling, because it was the one thing through my deepest, darkest grief that was there constantly for me. I journaled all the time when I was having all of my crazy thoughts. I just got them out on paper, you know. I'd say that journaling shouldn't be neat and tidy and beautiful. for me, it was literally getting all of the craziness out of my head and onto paper to help me try and process everything that I was feeling during that time, you know, the time of diagnosis, of fear, and then of just utter kind of confusion, you know, around my marriage breakdown, all of those sorts of things, just to get it out on paper.
I think that's brilliant. I used to, so I'm a little bit guilty of not journaling at the moment. But if you're sitting there and you don't know what to write, my tip would be write down, I don't know what to write.
Yeah,
it is like anything in grief or the difficult days you might be going through, is like just start. And so I say, like, you know, if you're with someone that's grieving, you don't know what to say, tell them, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. Same thing if you're journaling and don't know what to write, I don't know what to write, or just doodle. I draw sort of like random rabbits and stars and moons, you know, and it's just a trigger to help you.
That's it. I just, and what's interesting, so I still got all my journals. I keep wondering whether to at the end of last year I was like, oh, I'm going to burn them and kind of have a, I don't know, a ceremony and just kind of burn them all. And I decided not to. I decided to keep them, and I don't look at them often these days, but I think, you know, sometimes when I do, I see how far I've come as well. And it's not that you have to be better or get anywhere, but there's just some comfort that, you know, I did get through it. It was an extraordinarily difficult, challenging time, but I got through it. And I'm here to tell the tale, you know? Yeah.
And you didn't just get through one it, there was like 4 to 5 its as well.
Yeah.
And like, you know, we have so many people apply to be on the show, and I must turn away like 8 people a week.
Oh, wow.
And then we get a form like yours. I think I know I'm doing the right thing, because when I got your form, I was just like, oh my goddess, just amazing, you know.
Oh, Shelley, that's made me all teary now. Yeah, it's just, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here and to tell the story, you know. It really is an honor. Thank you.
Oh no, I'm like honored to have you here, because, you know, just one story of loss is enough in life, but you just had it, and in such a small time frame.
Yeah.
You know.
You know, the funny thing is, I didn't say this, but during that time, I was actually studying to be a nutritional therapist. So I had a full-time job and I was studying to be a nutritional therapist. And I took my exams for my 3rd year of study 4 weeks after my mum died. And I passed, and I still have no idea. It's funny how that survival mechanism does kick in, but maybe that was the thing that just kept me going. You know what you were saying about keeping you going? I think that was probably the thing at the time. I was determined to finish my studies, and that probably did keep me going through that time.
Yeah, and I love that, because it takes me back to when I worked with like the dying patients, that they used to say, like, you know, when they look back on their life, they always used to say, like, connect to something bigger than yourself. I always find something to believe in, and that could be yourself. It might be God and energy, volunteering, you know, a course, a job, you know, always find. And so, yeah, it's a bit like journaling, but it's one of those things that comes up, you know, just connect to something like within you, external to you, like the universe, you know, a course, and just find something to believe in, that thing that makes you put one foot on the floor in the morning when you're trying to get out of bed and having that self-doubt creep in.
I'm so glad you brought that in, Shelley, at the end, because the word that comes to me is faith. And there was something for me that I didn't ever lose my faith, you know, and I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why, because like I said, there were some really dark times. I mean, rock bottom. I definitely hit rock bottom. It was dark, but there was something, even if it was like the pilot, like there was some faith there. even when my marriage broke down, I didn't lose my belief in love. That might sound a bit cheesy, but I didn't. There was something deeper. And I don't know what that was, but it was there. It was within me. I love that you've brought that in, because I think that's really important. Yeah, I can't explain it, but it was there.
I absolutely love that. And I was going to say, like, is there a name for it? But obviously there's not. But like that inner knowing, like the claircognizance, where you just have a real
Yeah,
strong knowing. Because so many people, if they'd have had like a relationship breakdown, they then take that bitterness and carry it forward, but expect a different outcome,
yeah,
you know, and they're sort of like, well,
yeah,
he did this, he did that. But you had that knowing, that faith, that belief, connection with yourself,
yeah,
that the best is
yeah.
yet to come.
think it I think it was faith. I think for me it was faith. And yeah, and don't get me wrong, I got angry. I did get angry about it, and I did feel all of those sorts of things. But yeah, I never lost that belief, that faith in life. And that comes back to, I think, the work that I do is, it's all about kind of, I'm just curious about this crazy life that we're in. And I mean, the pandemic is kind of shown us that we just don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen. And that, for I have a deep curiosity about that. It's what's it like you were saying, what's it teaching us? What is this all about? I don't know the answers, but my curiosity is there, and my curiosity will continue.
Curiosity has been one of my favorite words this year. And I must say, as you were speaking, like my husband will say, like, my God, if he was a cat, he'd be dead, Shelley. Because I'm just always curious, what if kind of thing, but in a curious way, not in like, what if
Yeah,
we've done this, looking back on the past.
yes,
Mine's like, what if I try this? And I love that
yes,
curiosity. And I used to, for like many years, I mean, I'm 47 now, but I used to always fear the unknown, want to control and stuff like that. Since the
yeah,
pandemic, well, probably since the age of 40, actually, when I had a horrific pregnancy. I think that was a huge turning point in my life. But I think the pandemic, I thought,
yeah,
oh, well, I didn't see it coming. Doesn't matter if I'm like Mystic Meg, psychic or whatever, I didn't see the pandemic coming. And so I've just kind of resigned, again, like that permission to grieve. I think I've
yeah,
surrendered to life and just thought, let's just get that faith
yeah,
that, the best is yet to come,
yeah,
or there's meaning.
yeah. And that we just don't know, and we just don't know. And yeah, and we can come through it. We can come through it. And yeah, yeah. There are no words sometimes, are there?
Yeah.
There's no words, I think, sometimes to even try and describe it. But yeah, it's just crazy. And I think when we can release a little bit of control, the grip, the tightness, the fear, I think, then maybe we can kind of welcome something in.
Bless you. I could speak to you all day. I could. And we could just put the world to rights and help the world, I'm sure. But you can
Oh,
help
yes,
others,
please.
because bless you, you've got an amazing freebie with all your work that you offer. So tell the listener what you're offering.
Yeah. So I remember two things, Shelley. So if you sign up to my newsletter on my website, you get a free body meditation. So a bit like I was talking about earlier, I'm really passionate about our connection to our body. So this is a meditation that will really help you to drop into your body, to breathe into your body, to see where your body is and what it might be telling you. So you can do that. I also run free sessions every month called Moments of Stillness. Again, what we were talking about earlier. They're free sessions. They're just for an hour. The dates differ. They're all on my website. But really, there were two intentions. I set Moments of Stillness up this year, and there were two intentions. The first was just to bring people together when we weren't able to connect. I wanted to bring people together. So that was the first intention for me, as well as the people that were coming. I wanted to really connect with people. And then the second intention was to get away from all the noise, because I feel like everything has been so noisy this year, really, really noisy. And so, as it suggests, moments of stillness was just to kind of step away from the noise of the mind, the external noise, and just to come to a moment of stillness. So they're free sessions that I run every month. And if you look on my website, they're there, and you can just sign up to my newsletter, and then you'll get all of the details. And I also want to say that I know there is a lot of noise, and you can sign up and unsubscribe. It doesn't matter. You know, we get so many emails and things, but just come along when it feels right for you, if you want to come along.
Bless you. So your website is nickyforlife.com, and that's Nicky with a Y, so
Yes.
NICKY for life.com. And I love that, because not only have you shared the tools about finding moments of stillness, it's free. So there you go. They've got no excuse.
It's free.
No excuse.
That's it. I want to reach just as many people as possible. And, you know, yeah, I just want to support as many people as possible. So that's why I do the free things as well.
Nicky Duffell, I loved you from your application form, but you've made me cry today and everything, in a nice way. I just think you're the most beautiful soul. And speaking of synchronicity, I'm just so glad we met. I truly am. So thank you for joining me on the show.
I'm so grateful. Thank you, Shelley. And I can't wait to grab a copy of your book as well. Thank you so much for having me.
My absolute honour. Thank you ever so much. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you subscribe and leave a positive review. If you would like to create your own positive changes, you can buy Positive Changes, a self-kick book from all online book retailers or from shelleyfknight.com. If you need a dollop of positivity until the next episode, come like and follow us over on Facebook at Shelley F. Knight, Life Goes On. As always, I've been Shelley F. Knight, and you've been amazing.